Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum, namaste, Sastri Akal, namaste. My name is Farheen Khan and you're watching the Azeeza show. This week, actually, we're going to talk about something that is, I think, a really important topic and sometimes doesn't get discussed as much as it should be. And this is called 3-second divorce, or the idea of Talaq. And so with me today, we have our guest, Shazia Javed. You're a filmmaker. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. So, Shazia, I'm really excited. I know you through some of your work, but maybe you can share with the audience a little bit about who you are.
Well, I'm a filmmaker and community artist. I'm also the founder and CEO at Life Sketch Media Inc., which provides video solutions to small businesses and nonprofits.
Right.
But as a filmmaker, I mostly work on documentary films that deal with different social justice or equity issues.
Mm-hmm. And I know you. This isn't the first time you're on the Azeeza show. You were here before as well, so welcome back. I should say that.
Thank you.
There's a new film that's actually coming out, or that's just that you just released. My apologies. So, what exactly is that all about?
So 3 Seconds Divorce is my latest documentary. It made its international premiere at Mumbai International Film Festival, and it was here in Toronto at Real World, where it won the Audience Choice Award. Awesome. So I'm very thrilled about that. The film tells the story of Indian Muslim women who led the movement for a ban on instant oral divorce. What that is a tradition which is attributed to Islam, in which a man can just say the word talaq or divorce 3 times.
Right.
And the divorce is legal, it's valid, and it actually denies women any agency. A woman has no say in the matter. She's often thrown out of the house at that very moment. She's rendered homeless. And on top of that, let's say, as a man in my film says, that he just said the words in anger, right? He just said talaq, 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 but he didn't want to be divorced, but he said it. Right. But the community and the faith leaders wouldn't let him continue living with his wife. Right. So they're like, it's a valid divorce. So then they make the wife go through halala, which is that she is married to another man overnight for 1 night, and then this man is supposed to consummate the marriage, which is basically like rape. Right. And then he divorces her the next morning, and then she does the whole waiting period again, and then she's married to her original husband. So this whole process is so demeaning and oppressive, and the very fact that it's still happening in this day and age is infuriating.
Yeah, of course. So one of the parts of the film, I understand that you follow a particular woman and her story. So can you maybe give us a little bit of a sense of what that story was? Yes, so they're basically what you can say true narratives in the film. Primary narrative is of Lumna, and she was divorced this way by her husband. She had an infant son, and he divorced her and basically threw her out of his house. And was that intentional, or was that out of anger? It was out of anger, but then it was also an use of power. So what's also happening is many men would, marry this way, collect the dowry from the woman, and then divorce her. And then they will bring another wife, collect the dowry, and do the same, and then divorce her. Wow. So they just keep making money this way. So her husband divorced her, and she was asked to go through halala, but she refused. Right. And so it's her story, how she goes through a transformation, and she goes back to university, and gradually she becomes a member of Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, which is like a larger group of Indian Muslim women's reform movement who work at grassroots with Muslim women, and they also were at the forefront of advocating ban on this particular law, and they're generally for overall reform of Muslim personal law. So she joins that movement and finds her voice, but activism isn't easy. No. The women who are at the forefront of raising voice on any issue, they face a lot of financial hardship, sometimes social exclusion. It's emotionally challenging.
So it's all that process that she goes through, and film tells that story.
Right. Yeah. And it's a 3-year journey, right?
It is a 3-year journey. We did follow her for 3 years. Yeah.
Wow. So if I can ask you, like, what inspired you to do this film?
You know, this whole instant oral divorce, or triple talaq as it's called, it has bothered me for a long time. Like, I just can't believe that it's part of my faith system, and it has been practiced as such.
Right.
So it's been unacceptable to me as a Muslim, as a woman, and at that time as a citizen of India. I was like, you know, all the legal departments are accepting it, faith leaders are endorsing it, but you know, look at what is this doing to women, you know, and this is not just. So this cannot be right. And I knew, you know, I heard about certain relative going through this kind of divorce, and I saw the effect on them, and I would read stuff about this. So I remember, you know, when I was in school at that time, and I heard about this stuff, and all I could do at that time was write a letter to the editor, and that's what I did. I was like, this should be abolished. You know, it was a very passionate letter to the editor. And unfortunately, so many years later, here I was as a filmmaker, and this was still going on, still impacting women's lives.
For sure.
And I felt like now I have this powerful tool, and that I could do a bit more. I could show what effect this has on women, but I could also reclaim a bit of agency for Muslim women overall and say we have our own solutions to our problems. We need allies, but you know, Muslim women have a voice.
Yes.
So I could amplify that as well. So which is what the whole journey of making this film has been for me, and that's what's motivated me.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for doing this. I mean, you know, I'm sure it hasn't been easy. I'm really curious, like, what has been the response from people? How have people sort of taken the film?
It's actually doing good. Ever since we started now, we had a screening in UK, London recently, and I'm getting requests from Kenya, Pakistan, from wherever there is a substantial amount of particularly Sunni Muslim community, and it's being practiced, whether it's accepted by legal departments or not, even here in Canada, because if certain people believe it's a part of their faith, then they accept it, So I'm getting all those requests for screening, and I think there are lots of screenings lined up for next year, inshallah.
Okay, great. Excellent. And have you felt any sort of backlash or anything?
You know, I would say, like, there is more obvious backlash. I mean, I remember when I had at one point thought I would do a crowdfunding campaign, and I was still working on the film, and Times of India, which is the largest national daily in India, published my interview, and I was badly trolled online. I was called a whore, I was called a jihadi bride, because what happens, my work takes on various levels of oppression. I'm not just saying that this is what's happening to women in the community. My work is very layered. It also talks about how general anti-Muslim sentiment in a society makes it even more difficult for Muslim women to get their rights. So, and I said so much in my interview. So what happened, I started getting this from both the sides. You know, some hardliners from within the community and right wings from outside the community, which was obviously not very pleasant.
No, of course.
I mean, rationally, I knew they're trying to silence me, but somehow it still, you know, takes some kind of emotional toll on you.
Of course, absolutely.
So I backed off from that crowdfunding campaign at that time because I wanted to preserve my emotional energy for my film. I was like, I have to finish this. This is very important because there are all these women who are trusting me to tell their story. So I faced that, yes. But, you know, there's other kind of resistance that you see which is not very visible. There are certain spaces that will not celebrate your work. They will not champion you as theirs because you're doing certain kind of work. You know, you are not welcome in certain spaces like you would be if you were telling a simpler narrative.
Right. Like, could you give us an example?
I don't know. I mean, you might have seen this too. Like I mean, and I think it's pretty universal. Like every space or every institution has a certain agenda,
right?
And they just want to glorify work or artists
of their own,
which kind of aligns with that agenda. And if you're making work that does not align with anyone's agenda,
yes,
then you're basically on your own. So, so I have done a lot of pushing on this on my own.
Right.
But the beauty of it is that my biggest supporters have been the women.
That's great.
You should have seen the audience at Real World. Women drove from Brampton, Mississauga, from everywhere. Excellent. And they voted for the film. So that's all I need.
That's wonderful. Well, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back. Okay, we'll be back right after this. Hi everyone, you're watching the Azeeza show, and I'm just here with Shazia Javed talking about her film, 3 Second Divorce. So Shazia, you know, one of the things I wanted to ask you about the film was sort of the different perspectives, I guess, on the particular topic itself. Like, I know that you mentioned it. Have you interviewed some faith leaders in the film as well that sort of voiced their opinions on the issue?
Yes, so the film has interviews with different faith leaders, and they are the ones who are members of the body that governs Muslim personal law in India. And they all support triple talaq. They all support halala as it exists right now, external divorce, which is sad and dangerous, because there are different interpretations available of these verses of the Quran. There are gender just interpretations. There are ways to look at text differently, which makes more sense because as someone, I don't know who, I was reading someone's quote, it's not God if it's not just, right? So, but unfortunately, the predominant voices have been of these faith leaders. And that's something I'm trying to do with my film, to get the people who are either sitting on the edge or who don't believe in this, mobilizing them and you know, encouraging them to speak up because it is so important. And you know, and unfortunately in Lubna's story, there is no intersection with any of the faith leaders who don't believe in this because they don't reach out to help women like that. Why? So, and I know sometimes when I screen the film, and the film starts off and there are women, you know, they make it very clear, the women from Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan as well, they believe that it is not Islamic, that there has to be a period of arbitration, reconciliation before a divorce is final, you know. So there are women in the film and they are PhD scholars who make it very clear that this is un-Islamic and that in Islam there has to be a process of arbitration and reconciliation, that you cannot end a marriage in 3 seconds. So there is that view which is present in the film. Another interesting thing that happens, you know, every time I screen the film, especially a lot of members of the community, you know, they get up and they say, no, this is not part of my faith. And I'm very happy to hear that. Because I say this has been happening for so long and we have not been speaking up. We have not been getting up to say this. But if watching this film incites you to get up and say this is wrong, then I think I've done my job.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. So how, I wonder, like, how do you bring the faith leaders on board, right? Like, how do you actually find those individuals? How much progress do you think you've made? I mean, I know it's just recently come out, but do you feel like you're making progress?
Actually, when the film was still in the making, we did a screening of some of the bits and pieces, an interactive version in Toronto at that time at Noor Cultural Centre. And the panel after was attended by a local imam, Imam Shabir Ali, and he put a very strong case forward on why it is not a valid form of divorce. But unfortunately, even here, like so many women have reached out to me, there are so many local faith leaders who then say this is a valid form of divorce. I think as a filmmaker, my job is to put this out in open and portray what effect it has on families, not just on women. You know, it's breaking families. It's the effect it has on children.
For sure.
And hopefully, and have more screenings in the community itself. Like, I made sure even the festival screening was followed by a panel discussion where we had a lawyer, a local community organization. So I'm trying to do that more and more.
Right.
There's an upcoming screening in UK where they're having a panel with their local faith leaders and everyone. So it's actually really great to see that film is lending itself to such discussions in local contexts.
That's wonderful. That's really great. So what, where do you see yourself going from here? What's the next thing?
You know, I was like, as glad as I am to have finished this film, there was a time I was totally exhausted out of all my resources and my emotional energy. I was like, I'm not doing this again. But I am.
Right. I hope you are.
But of course. I'm still with this film.
Right.
I'm still taking it to different places, to different communities. It's available if there are any organizations or universities or small groups who want to host a screening. They can reach out at the film's website, which is www.3secondsdivorce.com, and they can host a screening that way. And if they want to organize a panel around it, I'm happy to guide, help, and say maybe this is what's best thing to do. So I'm working on that. And then obviously there are always a couple of ideas in development. I think next year, somewhere around March or April, I'll get more deeply into newer ideas and work on
That's great. Is there anything else that you've kind of discovered along the way in terms of making this film that was of interest, that sort of came up for you that perhaps you weren't thinking about before?
There's something that I really like to put out there, which for me was one of the greatest learning. Not so much in the time of I didn't know this, but because I maybe never gave this so much thought or this kind of perspective, because when we talk about feminism or women's right or movement, we sometimes talk about it in a very academic context, and we think women who go to university study gender studies, we are the feminists. But when I was shooting this film, I see Lubna, I see the women she's working with, women who are working on the ground, and they haven't even had the opportunity for that kind of education, and how self-aware they are, and how they're fighting with their circumstances. I'm like, salute to them, and these are the real feminist women, or these are the women who are actually spearheading these movements. So
Very cool.
I hope my film is a tribute to them in some way.
That's great. That's very exciting. So question for you then, what advice would you give to, to men, to faith leaders about this particular issue? What could you tell them?
I think I would tell them that, whatever you say actually has a huge impact. It impacts an entire family, and it can have a very long-lasting impact. So please, weigh this very carefully. And we are not talking about people who want to abandon their faith, or men or women. These are all practicing people. They believe in a just God, and they want to find solutions within their faith. So please don't disappoint them.
Right. Yeah, no, and I know that I've heard some stories from women as well who, I remember years ago there was a woman in their community here was like, well, there's this woman who, her husband, he just every day so often will say this, right? And then she's like, I don't know if they're still married or not because he said it so many times, right? And it's just one of these things where there's always, a husband might threaten the woman and say, if you don't do this, I'm going to give you talaq, whatever, right? There's always, it's unfortunate that that type of thing continues to happen, and that men feel that they have that power to do it. But you're right, it's the repercussions after the fact, right? How do you turn things around even if you did it out of anger, and many people feel like it's not something that it's still considered valid, and basically you've just thrown your life away, right?
Yeah, and you're right, like it skews the power equation in a marriage so much, and a woman in the documentary says that, that whenever her husband wanted her to do something, which she was uncomfortable with even. He would say, you do this, or I would divorce you.
Right.
So it's like this power stick in their hands. And if you give that kind of power to anyone, I mean, come on, we're human beings, right? It will get abused. So this is obviously not the right way to do it.
For sure. And I think that oftentimes with, I mean, not oftentimes, but unfortunately, you know, we see that in other places as well, right? Outside of divorce, it's like, how do you continue to use fear to scare people, and particularly women in relationships and stuff like that, you know? These comments of like, oh, if you don't please your husband, you know, the angels will curse you all night, like this type of thing, you know, keeps coming up. So it's like, I think it's a bigger conversation as well, is to say, you know, we need to really start to think about, you know, does this actually make sense? Is the interpretation correct, right? Like, no one's questioning the words of God. They were questioning the way in which they're being used to hurt other people, you know?
Definitely. Yeah. Yes, that is, and which is why I wanted to tell the story, and I wanted to retain the editorial and creative control, because I wanted to maintain that framework, that these are Muslim women fighting to reclaim their Islamic rights. Right. These are Muslim women fighting to reclaim their citizenship rights. They are not, and not just let it be, you know, co-opted by, you know, some anti-Muslim sentiment or people, you know, who have other agendas. Which is why I think there has been an additional pressure while making this film, because I felt that I had to retain that framework, and rightly so, because that's what the women on the ground believe. Yeah, absolutely. But as we know how easy it is these days for or ever for a work to get co-opted that way. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm really glad that this is 100% my vision and the vision of the women on the ground, and you worked hard to keep it that way.
That's wonderful. Do you have any sort of so just get, like, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but just curious, like, how did the women feel once they saw the film?
Oh, Farheen, you should have seen the energy at the Mumbai screening, and I'm so glad that's where we started. Right. The film's journey, that was the premiere. Right. And half the theater was filled with Muslim women activists. Right. And they were cheering, they were raising slogans. Then in the end, like, you should just see, I mean, and I felt, you know, before I went for the screening, I was feeling slightly unsafe, and, you know, oh my God, how going to people react? What if there's some right-wing people? What if there are some hardliners from within the community? Will I be safe? And I go there and I see all these women. I was like, I am safe here. I didn't feel alone at all, and it was a wonderful, wonderful screening. I actually have a photo with them we did after the screening with this, you know, logo statue of the festival, and we should see, like, so many Muslim women, and all dressed differently, with headscarves, without headscarves, with abaya, without abaya, you know, just being their beautiful, amazing selves. And I'm one of them with them, and that was, I think, the best reward.
Amazing. That's great. Well, I mean, you know, you're doing such great work, and being able to tell the stories of women, and being able to talk about, you know, these topics that are so crucial to talk about, you know, like, it's just, it's really phenomenal work that you're doing, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you, and I believe you're doing the same, so there's that allyship here. Thanks so much for here.
Thanks. Well, we'll definitely try to find a time to screen your film. I'm excited to get some of the women here, but you know, I just want to take a moment to thank you again for your time, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for him.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching this week. As you heard it, please go and check out 3secondsdivorce.com and learn more about how you can get access to this film. This issue is something that really needs to be amplified and talked about. And we need to find a solution. So until next week, take care.